There was a moment of stillness for about 20 to 30 seconds before the badminton court cracked up and Block 1 moved 1.5 to 3.5 meters before tilting forward and eventually crashing to the ground.
The date's impressed in my mind, it'll never go away. It was 11th of December in 1993, 1:35 in the afternoon.
Uncle Pang Aheng lost 3 generations in his family, his wife, mother and son.
At about noon, soon after noon, all the 3 of them, the grandma, the mother and the younger son, were preparing dinner in the kitchen when the whole thing collapsed. So there was no reunion dinner.
For Uncle Mushtaq Ahmad, the tragedy claimed the lives of his daughter, son-in-law and infant grandson.
When this tragedy happened, I was in. I was here. I'm not trying to be a crybaby, but it's factual thing that comes. I can't even control. All the mechanism goes tighten up again. Can't talk. This is my daughter. There's a baby, the husband. They all perished.
That thing happened on Saturday, 11 December. Friday, 10:30, she called me. She said, tomorrow I coming with her husband and all that. And she said, you cook dal and make sambal patai, she said. Her birthday was 23rd, so she made 28, like just small makan afternoon, and she called us and all that. So we went there. We went her apartment there. So we saw in the balcony was crack and all that, even uncle mentioned to her husband. He said, this all got crack here and all that, you all better shift from here. So, actually they want to shift December in, So, they cannot make it.
Dr. Ian Gray was returning home from work when he drove straight into a nightmare.
The hill's made as decomposed granite. And if you can think of a giant sponge, and when you put a sponge in the water, it fills, in a saucer, it fills up, and then that's basically what happened. The ground couldn't take it anymore. I think I heard it rather than, saw it. I think the clouds coming over, I thought it was an optical illusion. And the woomph, my family were there at the bottom of the hill, and they said, Highland Towers has come down. I know the TV cameras and everything all around, it looked as if nothing was happening, but behind the scene, behind there, it was actually on the ground and people running around and screaming. And I was involved in the rescue for the full 12 days. I think the first 4 days we just didn't sleep. We were very lucky, very, very lucky that we were able to rescue the maid and Tun Musahitam's granddaughter, and that's the only ones that came out alive. Despite all efforts and experts from around the world, they were the only two who survived. The thing is, there were no survivors after that. I think everyone, it was instantaneous, and I was there when we pulled the 48 bodies out, every single one. Most of them were in the staircase. I mean, some were even the same shape of the steps because of the crushing weight, and it's a very unpleasant smell, a sickly sweetness, and not pleasant.
They finally found my family's bodies. It was very sad. When I saw my son's body, all the skin in both the hands were gone. Obviously, he was trying very hard to remove the rocks and all sort of things, trying to save the grandmother and the mother. So much so when his body was taken out, there was no more skin on the hands, and they could not take any thumbprint. They could not actually even check through the thumbprint and check on the IC.
Following the collapse, over 1,000 residents were ordered to vacate the remaining 2 blocks. Initial plans to demolish the building did not materialize, and they remain standing today as a stark reminder of a once bustling vertical kampung. Dr. Muhammad Asbi Osman, who was part of a 10-member investigation team, prepared a geotechnical report on the cause of the landslide. They found that prolonged water seepage had triggered the massive soil movement behind Block 1.
I point the fingers to several factors. One of them is probably the uncontrolled development within the Ampang Hills, and there is no so-called proper control over the drainage. Not only the drainage of a new development, when you actually develop an area, you have to submit to a local authority, and that normally looks okay on the plan. But then, how do you actually control it when the construction is taking place? When they were doing the land clearing, when they were doing the earthworks, where does the water channel to?
Lawyer Rajendra Navaratnam, whose team handled the Highland Towers case, describes the drainage problem that triggered the landslide.
Originally, it flowed right down here by the side of Highland Towers. The stream then, instead of flowing down its natural course, was diverted, and it flowed directly upslope from the Highland Towers. There were 10 days of continuous rainfall, and the whole of the slope got waterlogged, and eventually there was this collapse.
Mike Ricard, a safety engineer, was a key witness in the Highland Towers case. His photographs of a dangerous stream diversion on the hill behind Block 1 helped prove negligence.
And this was, if you can imagine it, is the Antarabangsa development. And this was a hillside up here which had been totally denuded of trees, right? Now what they had done, and this sloped away from here down even further into the development. So what had happened is they had built a dam across here, so that any water coming from the top of the hillside down hit this dam and then was diverted into here. Water course was full of washdown material, rundown material, mud and sand, which has come and can only come from the development. This had in turn over the time had blocked the drains which were running across the top of the hillside at Highland Towers, which in turn caused water to overflow and go down the hillside, which eventually weakened the soil to the point of collapse and landslide. There was a failure of duty on the part of the state government and also the Majlis and PAJ to continue to monitor, to maintain and repair where required that watercourse. So if it wasn't for that failure, 48 people would still be alive today. You've disturbed nature and nature comes back and bites you.
Derek Fernandez, an expert on planning laws and local governance, says most disasters are man-made.
It is got nothing to do with the act of God, or heavy downpour and the usual stories which you hear. It's really got to do with human error. The guidelines, rules, laws and the requirements, if they were followed to the T, I would be confident that more than 95% of these tragedies could have easily been avoided.
In December 1996, 73 residents from blocks 2 and 3 sued the relevant parties, including the Ampang Jaya Municipal Council, for negligence and won compensation. However, the local authority appealed all the way to the federal court, claiming protection under Section 95(2) of the Street Drainage and Building Act 1974. They argued that the provision grants them indemnity for losses suffered should a building collapse.
The verdict, of course, it held certain parties liable. The amount of compensation was apportioned, so on and so forth. But the local authority got off. It got off in the sense it was held not liable by virtue of an immunity under Section 95 of the Street Drainage and Building Act. The Act does give them an immunity under Section 95, that is officers of the local authority, as well as the local authority itself and the state government in relation to any direction they have given under the Act. It says that, yes, I can ask you to tear down that wall, but if you tear down that wall and somebody dies, it's not my fault. Yeah, I know.
People who have died here are actually, their deaths are caused by someone, by the authority and some other people who have been found liable, and yet the authority is allowed to go free.
It was a wash hands for the local authority. You can approve building plans without being responsible for them if you're negligent. What if they willfully disregard hill slope guidelines? And he goes ahead and approves it anyway. Failure to follow guidelines and rules that have been expressly brought to your attention, or ones which you reasonably should have known about, constitutes bad faith, and therefore the immunity should not apply.
We feel that something needs to be done for Parliament to make this clear, so that there is no room for doubt, no room for argument in courts, that local authorities enjoy a special position.
Derek insists that the local authority should be held accountable.
Everybody was very disappointed. One would expect a more liberal court to look into the whole issue of whether that immunity should apply in the circumstances of the case, whether public policy, and this whole public policy argument is being pushed to an absolute ridiculous limit. The public policy argument was always the case that because the poor ratepayer will have to pay, and that's an unfortunate situation. I would like to see more people sacked, more officers held personally liable for their actions, especially where they don't follow the proper procedures and guidelines. It's such a simple matter. I mean, these people are paid salaries to sit there. It's not doing it for free. Don't they have a certain duty, a standard of care?
In fact, during the trial, evidence showed that the Drainage and Irrigation Department had sent letters to the local government recommending that the Highland Towers project be stopped until an improved drainage was built. These repeated warnings were ignored.
It should not have happened. Should not have happened. It was criminal negligence. It was total disregard for procedures that have been set by law. And then you get the authorities. Of course, you can't sue us. We are untouchable. That's what hurts. People died, and they still want to come up with things like this.
Since the Highland Towers tragedy, more disasters continue to happen, yet no one is made accountable. It seems that life in Malaysia is worth very little. The Kampung Pasir landslide, the fifth in Hulu Klang since 1993, occurred about 2 kilometers from the Highland Towers. 2 women and 2 children were buried alive in mud 3 meters deep. More than 150 were left homeless, including residents of nearby Taman Zoo View, who were ordered to abandon their homes.
Hulu Klang, another collapse, landslide, 4 people have died there. What recourse do they get?
Memang tidak ada. Memang tidak ada. Saya merujuk kepada apa yang dimaklumkan oleh pihak pentadbir negeri. Memang tidak ada. Tidak ada secara khusus lah. Sebenarnya dari segi bantuan kita bagi. Pengawasan tidak ada.
Met on site, University Malaya geologist Associate Professor Muhammad Ali Hassan blamed the local authority for lack of monitoring.
The government never take any action to monitor the situation of the area. The experts have issued guidelines on development on hill slope area. For example, there should be no development at all in any hill slope that is 35 degrees or more. See the angle of slope, 35 degrees or more. Less than 35, you have to follow some guidelines. There's a specification there.
When there is a hill slope development and an engineer, consultant engineer, geotech engineer suggests that we need to do this, that and that to prevent a landslide, his client invariably says, how much is going to cost me? And says, oh no, this is too expensive, can you do it at this budget? And he says, no, if I follow the guidelines, I don't think so, or never mind, I'll find another engineer who will do it. And these kind of practices, although people don't talk about, happen.
We have never gained any or learned any lesson from the previous surrounding nearby landslide. So you are calling for more.
How can any house buyer go into his home and say, okay, I bought my home, now how do I know that the drains are adequate? How do I know that the authorities have taken the appropriate action that I'm going to be safe in my home? If they know that, well, I'm sure they know that they have indemnity, it raises a big question mark. How safe is your own home?
Recurring landslides are proof enough that something is wrong in our approval process for hill slope development. Local government, being the approving authority, must somehow be held accountable and not hide behind the legal immunity granted by Section 95(2).
Why have such an immunity? We must go back in history. Originally, local government was elected so that the ultimate responsibility and accountability will be on those elected representatives to see that the local authority does a professional job. Now, if they fail, if they are negligent, the public at the next election can throw the whole lot of them out and put in new people who are capable of doing the job. In the haste to amend the Local Government Act during the emergency period, they removed local government elections but forgot to amend so many pieces of legislation where the issue of accountability of local government to the ratepayer is protected. Because the protection of the accountability was in the election process. Once you remove that, everything fell.
That bad law must be amended, not for the sake of Highland Towers anymore, but for future generations.
We can't do anything now about Highland Towers, but perhaps if the authorities could look into it and change those bylaws that holds the local authorities and the national authority responsible. Go around and look at the slopes now. They put up a few plastic sheets. Within a week, the water's undermines in behind it, they're torn. So it's another disaster waiting to happen. How many more people have to die?
Oh no, oh my, it's another day in time. Please wait for me. Do I have to fight alone? When my world came tumbling down, down, down. So I'll wait for my time, but I won't let this pass me by. Hold me, I'll survive. won't let this pass me by. I'll never let this pass me by. Once more, maybe twice, we can even reach the stars. How much is enough? When will all this ever end? When the walls come tumbling down, down, down. When your world comes tumbling down, down, down. So I'll wait for my time, but I won't let this pass me by. Hold me, I'll survive, but I won't let this pass me by. I'll never let this pass me by. I'll never let this pass me by.